what is the magic script and what can we learn from it?
Sure, it's a messaging framework that can be used for any type of communication. As I started to work with a variety of clients and understand what their challenge is, again, I see the world through the lens of magic. And I thought about presenting a trick to an audience and what is the structure of that trick. Now, I was fortunate enough to be included in a training program with a Broadway director. He was in the original cast of Annie. He's a magician himself. He's directed, 22 Broadway productions. And so we went to Montreal for about a week, about 10 of us, and actually went about 5 times to this event. And looking at how you connect with an audience, where is the trigger of intrigue, and then how do you satisfy that desire for somebody to see the conclusion of that trick. And so as I thought about that, I went, well, that's the exact same thing that needs to happen with any sort of messaging. And so we'll just talk about that from a commerce perspective. Nothing happens until you make a connection with somebody. So we've all heard about know, like, and trust. And so that's the first framework. And the connection point releases oxytocin in the brain, which are the neurotransmitters that can, communicate with the rest of the body. And that's that trust factor. And so whether it is some type of rapport, common ground, you're identifying that you know their problem, that's the first thing. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to activate curiosity. And so when you activate curiosity, that's a release of dopamine. I know that we're all familiar with, people who are supposedly addicted to social media and they talk about dopamine high. Well, it's not the addiction to social media, it's actually the expectation of a reward. And so when you post something, you're expecting that people are going to like it, love it. And so there's this chemical that is an anticipatory chemical and it needs to be closed. And so we move from the connection to the curiosity, and then we need to move to the conversion, and that's the solution. And the conversion is a release of serotonin, which is that feel good, everything's right with the world. And I started to look at that from a magic perspective. If a magician walks out on stage, he's going to greet the audience, he's going to win them over, right? And then he's going to say, he or she is going to say, I'm going to float this woman in the air. And so your brain is like going, how is that possible? Then the actual magic happens, and then you see the person floats up, floats down. That's release of the serotonin. And so if you can classify, every magic trick can be grouped into 13 different effects. So you start with the effect. And so it could be a production, making something appear. It could be a vanish. It could be a restoration. And so if you think about what your business is, if you have a product launch, that's a production, right? If you are in the roofing business or in the restoration business, then that's a natural form of restoring back something to its initial state. If you are in leadership and sales weren't great, well, are you restoring sales back to the way they were before? So you take one of those effects, that is the focus, that is the key purpose of what you're trying to communicate. And then there is particular phrasing that takes you from connection, curiosity, and conversion so that you are taking advantage of our natural tendencies to follow story pattern, to follow what we are wired to absorb through a connection, whether it be through an ad, through a speech, through a Zoom conversation that we're having. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I've not been able to break it yet. And it's just a fascinating thing that I'm able to translate something that I'm very familiar with from the magic world and then apply that to commerce or any sort of connection or messaging framework.